A few people at my current job let slip that they were into video games, so I tried to spark conversation with them talking about new stuff like Mario Wonder, Baldur's Gate, and the new teases for the next Final Fantasy XIV expansion. They laughed me off, telling me I was a single-player Andy, and began talking about Call of Duty, Fortnite, and Apex Legends and their upcoming Battle Passes, seasons, and DLCs. I asked if that's all they played, then surely they must be really good, right? They got real quiet after that. There's nothing wrong with liking multiplayer games, but when you keep chasing hype trends in favor of actually being good at anything, I begin to question your life decisions. Mind you, time wasted having fun is not wasted time. However, time wasted obsessing over upcoming releases while having no appreciation for the world of classics is to fall victim to one of the classic blunders. What do you do when there's a drought of content in your favorite live service, or when there's a lengthy wait period between right now and the game you really want to play? You get off of Twitter, stop worrying about release schedules and keeping up with the times, and embrace your backlog. I've been meaning to play all the numbered Final Fantasy games, and 14's current expansion, Endwalker, taking heavy inspiration from 4, was the perfect excuse to try out the remastered version on Steam. But I don't want to review this game. The only way I could is by comparing it to modern titles, which is unfair, because this game is from 1991. But at the same time, comparing it to modern games could show how it held up and whether or not it aged gracefully. I think the best thing is as follows. Rather than reviewing these games, I'll take handwritten notes and explain what conclusions I arrived at for my playthrough and what I've learned. Cecil's in a bind. His men are questioning the king's motives for attacking a defenseless town and stealing their crystal, an artifact most important to them. He covers for his majesty and says that the town they just pillaged, Mysidia, knew too much about the crystal. His men know better and understand his conflict within, to his kingdom and father figure, or to himself and what's truly right. After reporting to the king, doubt is sensed in Cecil, who is subsequently demoted and immediately assigned to travel to Mist, a small village to the north, and deliver a ring. Cain Highwind appears to back up Cecil, only to be sent packing with them. After a farewell to his beloved Rosa, Cecil and Cain make their way to Mist as the music begins to play. I didn't personally expect the intro to this game to not only draw me in, but immerse me. Look at these corny-ass chibi people, and look at corny-ass me for believing this story. Mind you, while I've personally always been one to say that graphics don't matter, I have been one to say that they damn well help when it comes to telling a story. This is a small-scaled and uncomplicated narrative. Compared to the crazy shit later titles do, this is a welcome change of pace. A lot of story points in this game feel like they start really strongly. We meet Rydia after accidentally slaughtering her village and inadvertently killing her mom. Cain and Cecil feel horrible and they try to care for her to atone, and instead we get our shit rocked, seemingly losing Cain in the process. In the dead of night, soldiers from Baron try to kill her to exterminate any and all summoners who could pose a threat to the kingdom, and Cecil, in an act of mutiny, bodies them, earning Rydia's trust. This is all happening in the span of a few minutes and can feel pretty fast, but I'm willing to forgive it because of what games were capable of at the time. Battery storage in those cards probably weren't cheap. The resolutions, however, suck. Let's go back to Rydia. You notice that despite access to summons and black magic spells, she doesn't have one of the go-to spells, Fire. While a pretty clever way to reflect her trauma for the bomb ring incident, the resolution feels laughable. An ice wall blocks our progress, and it's up to Rydia to step up to the plate and get rid of it with a fire spell. And she refuses, saying that it clearly reminds her of a very traumatic experience. So how do we resolve this? We tell her to get over it and she just does. What? Just like that? All that setup for this? It feels strange, as we have a far better way that we come to a resolution to a character trauma in the form of Prince Edward. The Red Barons air raid the kingdom of Damcian, killing many, including the daughter of the legendary sage Tella. Tella is furious at both Edward and the man responsible for the attack, Golbez, the new mysterious leader of the Red Wings and the king's right-hand man. Edward's distress over the loss of his beloved haunts him until we get to a scripted battle where he sees the spirit of her aiding him in a fight against a Sahagin. He discovers newfound resolve, pledging to aid Cecil in his plights. There are so many points in the game where we have hastily rushed resolutions to character arcs, and not nearly enough like Edward's. Like Cecil being a Dark Knight. He seems to have a good enough constitution despite, 2 discrepancies on his behalf, one of which being an accident. Neither would even point at and say, yeah, he did that because he was a Dark Knight. I don't exactly see the reason for him to get the class change and lose his cool darkness ability. At least becoming a paladin gets you white magic. It's not as good as Rose's white magic, but still. If you want a Final Fantasy where a character's internal turmoils are better reflected, 7 is always going to come to mind far before 4. Soon enough, however, I realized that the story wasn't something to take all too seriously. Big dramatic scenes would have the goofiest solutions. Palom and Porum, the young twins, sacrificed themselves to become statues, to hold back the walls of a room that was crushing us. Yeah, I'm gonna press on, carrying their sacrifice so I can make their deaths count, and they're okay. Sid jumps off the airship to blow himself up, to give us a shot to escape the underground and live, and he's fine. Rydia, the poor child who got roped into our shenanigans, was cast overboard and is presumed dead. No, wait, this part is actually really cool. Tella dies. He is replaced immediately by Rosa. We beat Golbez, and his detached Evil Dead hand gets the crisp fuck this. I don't care anymore. Because honestly, right now, I don't care to talk much about the story anymore, so let's move on to music. It's good, as expected from Final Fantasy. The jump to the Super Nintendo and the SSMP sound chip probably really let Squaresoft cook back then. The overworld. Theme of love. I'd like to say the combat theme is good, but after hearing it so many damn times, I'm gonna need some time away from it. Fabul, I feel like, is a pretty great sleeper hit. It's so good. Sid's theme just reminds me of him and Edge doing that stupid ass little dance, and I smile every time. Samba de Chocobo. Honestly, any and all Chocobo songs, as far as I'm aware, just go hard. That weird song that plays in the moon. So strange, but it's rad as hell. But yeah, nothing new under the sun has been learned. Final Fantasy game had a good soundtrack. Okay, combat. I didn't experiment with it too much. Outside of hitting elemental weaknesses, occasional buffs and debuffs, Final Fantasy IV is pretty standard. Drop the enemy's health to 0, use your hardest hitting moves, and spot heal every now and again. It isn't too much you can do to set battles to end faster, rather it's mostly you just responding to what enemies are presented to survive and whittle them down. There's an auto battle feature courtesy of the Pixel remaster, but it just automatically recycles the last inputted move, which could accidentally waste MP on a healing spell that doesn't do much, or elemental attacks that don't hit any weaknesses. I would have preferred a speed up feature, kind of like what you see in emulators, especially with that absolute horde of enemies with long attack animations, namely the bats that spam that blood drain ability. It doesn't exactly hurt that it's usually a better idea to use melee against most enemies instead of wasting MP on something that isn't a healing spell so you don't waste gil on potions. You're better off using it on the non-metallic gear for the Magnetic Cavern and Phoenix Downs anyway. All in all, it's inoffensive. It doesn't do anything revolutionary, at least besides adding the ATB to the series, but I haven't played the first 3 titles to see what a turn-based Final Fantasy is like without it though, so I may come to love or loathe it by the time I get around to visiting the first 3. Progression is pretty linear, even if sometimes I'm not sure where I have to go. Upon further reflection, however, that's on me. I wanted to beat this game without using a guide, hence why I never got the Sylph summons, or found Yang's wife to wake him up with a frying pan. That is to say, I learned something new. If you want to know where things are in old games like these, talk to everyone in towns and keep notes. Another thing I learned was that I despise difficulty spikes. I grinded for 3 hours near Troya because I kept getting my ass handed to me, making my way back to the Black Chocobo. I thought this was the game's way of warning me that the next dungeon, the Magnetic Cavern, was going to be a problem, but no, not at all, actually. I was progressing no problem inside that dungeon. Troya's overworld enemies are just annoying. In truth, the only places I felt the need to grind was inside the Giant and the last few floors of the Lunar Subterrane. Something you should know about me is that I actually don't necessarily hate grinding. My most played games, in fact, are ones where grinding is the name of the game. What I don't care for is when the grind isn't fun. I like leveling in Final Fantasy XIV because the combat is fun, it unlocks great stories the more I level, and I like the rewards. Warframe is just plain dumb fun. Nothing to it. But when the combat is as vanilla as this... When I found out I was just too underleveled to take on the final battle Zeromus, I had to backtrack all the way to a save point just so I could walk forward and back for an hour so I could get a few levels, and I was pretty pissed. Everyone on the planet tells me that Final Fantasy IV is as easy as Final Fantasy gets, that this is a baby game for babies. I decided, against my better judgment, to just go through the motions, get my numbers up, and give it another shot. It's funny. I was so ready to write off this game because of this one last annoying difficulty spike compared with how bland this all felt. But once properly leveled, Zeromus was my favorite boss in this entire game, and for once, the ATB began to make me feel that magic feeling other Final Fantasy games make you feel. You know the one. The bob and weave, where you aren't just mashing the attack button, but when you get to pop off as fast as you can. Keeping Rydia in Pock, so she can use items just in case Rosa the White Mage goes down. Rosa popping off healing spells at the right time to follow up Zeromus' Big Bang attacks while the boys are on melee and jump duty. Knowing when to heal in response to the different moves, maybe even letting the boss attack first, and the black magic causes Zeromus to counter makes fighting him a totally different battle. He was easily my favorite combat scenario in the entire game. I'm honestly really happy this game managed to end on a high note for me. All in all, after 30 years, this game held up pretty well. While the combat isn't much to write home about, its storytelling is pretty cool for some pixels. That said, this game is primitive. A lot of other RPGs with loads of quality of life upgrades have come out since then, few being this game's descendants. Would someone like me, a person who doesn't play a lot of older titles, find value in this? Yeah, I'd say so. As for whether or not this game is something I would recommend to someone new to RPGs altogether, nah, play Persona 5. And with that, after reading back my notes, here's what I've learned. If I want to explore the world, that feeling will come naturally. Depends on whether or not the world feels worth exploring. Older games, while not as sophisticated as newer titles, were popular in their heyday for a reason. Go in expecting something less AAA and more along the lines of today's indie scene. RPG combat feels the best when I am the most involved, or when they have unique systems that tie into each other, such as rewarding foresight or skill rather than raw level checks. And lastly, never be afraid to look up a guide. Shoutouts to twitch.tv/AbbyYourShield for making my profile picture and just being a base free company leader. And as for next time, there are way too many cool games coming out this year. I don't know what video I'll make next, and that both excites and scares me, but at least it'll keep me on my toes. I could review the newest game on the block, or I could talk about Lego Batman. You don't even know.